at all. We had a pleasant evening last night, although I did see a nice picture of you on Twitter as well, yourself and Mr. Hadfield.
He's an incredible man, no doubt about that.
Yeah, well, it would have been an exciting event, but we had a little fun event of our own last night, which was a great time.
$250 a plate. How many people there?
I think the number I keep hearing is 300.
Wow.
So it was a big crowd, and it was great to see the support there. And Dwight and Seamus did a great job, and it was fun. It was nice to see that support.
Well, that support is important, and so is the $250 a plate. And it's funny how the cycle of politics changes very quickly. It's not so long ago, and you and your father will remember these days, unfortunately, where that was an impossibility for the Liberal Party to be able to pull off that event. But things are coming around. Things have certainly changed, not only in the polls, but in the ability to raise money and energize your volunteers. So I guess there's some congratulations to do on that front. It's exciting for you, crowd, for sure.
There's a lot of good people working very hard to make these things happen. So I think a lot of my appreciation goes to them, to these people behind the scenes that really, they work the phones to make this happen. So I'm just happy to be a part of it. But the reason I wanted to call in today, Patty, again, yesterday being the first day back in the house, we were all pretty excited. It's basically like back to school, really. And I had an opportunity to ask some questions yesterday on a pretty important topic, and that was the Family Violence Intervention Court. Mm-hmm. And again, it's something that, you've had a number of calls over the last couple of years, and it's pretty amazing. Like, you ask questions, and, you get the answers, and then when you sit back, you get an opportunity to look at them, it raises a whole number of new questions. I asked the Premier yesterday, I said, are you going to reinstate the Family Violence Court, which again costs $1 per person per year in this province. And the Premier talks about how important it is. He's interested in it. He knows how important it is. And not only that, they're reviewing the Family Violence Court, and they'd like to expand it to the rest of the province. Yep. So my next question was, well, why did you vote to eliminate it the last time? And, of course, at that point, the Premier wouldn't answer that question and put Mr. King up. And, Mr. King being the Minister of Justice at the time, that did cut the Family Violence Court. So it's funny, you get different people speaking to these justice questions depending on the question. But what I'm interested in finding out, and I can't, unfortunately, is we actually put, a couple of years ago, apparently Cabinet did an internal assessment of the Family Violence Court. Now, we requested it, but, of course, that got shut down under Bill 29. It was Cabinet confidences. I'm wondering now, because, again, the Premier says now, well, we're studying it again. My question is, what came out of the last study?
Budget cut.
Budget cut. But, again, if we put it out there to us, let's see what came out. I know that's what the Minister said, but it's changed, too. Last year, in estimates, actually, I think this was just back in the spring in estimates, and it was when Terry French was Minister of Justice. There were questions put to him in the budget. Is there any work being done to reinstate the Family Violence Court? And the answer, very simple, right here in black and white. No, there is not. No, that is not a plan. That is not going to happen. So it's funny how there's so many changes going on within the ranks. I guess, I don't know if it depends on the minister. It's funny. There's so much internal dissension here, when at the end of the day, the one thing that I think everybody should and can agree on is that it's worthwhile, it's a great investment, and it should be there because it's proven.
Andrew, we've talked a lot about how it was cut. We've talked about at this point anyway, the lack of willingness to reinstate it. Let's talk about how it works, because a lot of people are, this has become a political football, and maybe a lot of people who hear these shows and hear comments and questions come from the House of Assembly don't even know exactly how this operated and what the ultimate benefit was to those who avail of this service. Describe what would be a candidate in a case and a family that would be directed to Family Violence Intervention Court, and how it worked in contrast to the normal or the other avenues available.
Well, again, I'm going to speak from my layman's position, or my opposition member responsible. I unfortunately never had a chance to do one of these because it was only available on the Avalon. So I never did when I was practicing. I never had an opportunity to avail. But my understanding, I guess if we were to break it down, is that when one of these matters goes into court, they have to assess whether it can fall into the Family Violence Intervention Court procedure. And one of the big things is that the accused is going to plead guilty in the process. If the accused is not willing to participate, then this matter doesn't go there.
Right.
In the regular if they want to plead not guilty and to exercise their opportunity to fight this charge, then it stays in the regular judicial system. But in many cases, we have situations where, like, all parties involved, they realize the situation and they want to admit guilt, I guess, and work on trying to figure out the situation. And it's hard to do that when you go through the regular court process. And, if you are found guilty, we're talking about criminal records. Then we get into situations, especially where children are involved. Then you're bringing in CYFS. Then you're bringing in, there's a whole number of issues. What comes out of this is that it actually reduces the number of people, I guess it's recidivism. It reduces the number of people that are going back to this pattern of behavior.
But that comment is based on what? Because if you're willing to plead guilty and you would have pled guilty in Supreme Court, what's the difference between pleading guilty? And I'm just asking so people get a better understanding. What's the difference between pleading guilty there and pleading guilty in Family Violence Intervention Court? And what does that have to do with recidivism?
Well, I guess, and again, I can't speak for sure on this. I know there's some advocates out there that could. If you're willing to plead guilty, then I think there's an assessment done by the people in that particular system to looking at the factors within your case, looking at the factors within the situation. Are you a good candidate for this? And there's a number of factors, I would assume. I guess they look at prior record, they look at family history, they look at the facts of the situation. And again, if it's going into this court, then what happens is that there's really a process where we realize the situation that happened. And I don't know if it's a case of trying to keep families together, but one of the big issues that's often prevented this is that about 80% of family violence incidents go unreported because, we have kids involved, and people don't want to get involved in that court system. This court system is meant to be more welcoming, basically. And at the end of the day, the statistics that I've seen is that people that go through this system, there is a much greater rate that they will not recommit or go back in, fall back into this pattern of behavior.
Right off the bat, I think it's a good idea. And what I know about it, and I've asked these questions before, privately and on the air, what I know about it seems like it would be a reasonable way and a reasonable expense and for all the right reasons. I know it saw some 20-plus cases from start to finish. There was, at the time it was cut, I think there were 6 active cases inside Family Violence Intervention Court. So knowing exactly how it works and what the benefits are, I think are important, especially for the political conversation and for the society's understanding of it. But when it comes to recidivism, with all due respect to everyone involved and the advocates for yourself, Ms. Rogers, and many others across the province, I don't even think we have a certain determined amount of time that's long enough to determine what the recidivism rates would be. So that's one point. And I think we've got to spell out for the public so that people understand exactly how it works in contrast to the other courts as to why. Because, protecting families, protecting children, protecting women should really trump a lot of the conversation surrounding cost. But to have people understand what it can do for the family unit and how it differs from the courts, I think that's something we haven't discussed in full yet, and I think it's an important part of the conversation.
And I tend to agree with you. I think it's something that wasn't given the opportunity to be fully explored. Again, it was only available in one region, so much of the province never had access or any idea about it. And again, these types of process, I think they need time to take. Many systems don't just automatically jump into something. I think you need to get more people aware. I'm sure that there were lawyers in the system that weren't really aware of it and didn't know about what it had to offer. We need to teach lawyers. We need to teach people. We need to teach anybody that is going to be privy to this system. And that, again, comes back to, like you say, education and getting the word out. I think that the track record would be much better, but again, we didn't have the time. It was cut.
Yeah, there's still a lot of conversation to have on this front, because I know currently, and this is not a criticism of you or anyone else, to hold the government's feet to the fire is an important part of what you do as members of the official opposition. I think that all who are speaking to it now, we've got to have a better understanding of what it actually was, as opposed to what has now become a political football, as opposed to what could be a meaningful part of the justice system. So I appreciate your time this morning, Andrew, and I'm going to try to learn more about it. And also, if there's any such comparisons to be had with other provinces of that type of approach, and what recidivism rates really look like, because that would be the key, wouldn't it? Because if you're guilty, you're guilty, you're guilty. But if it can actually do something about further protecting the family, and having people realize realize that where they've gone wrong, what they've done, and to curb any potential for recidivism or repeat offending, then I think that should be really where we focus in to justify the existence, as opposed to the political capital being lost and gained on the conversation, if that's a fair ball and a fair comment.
I think it speaks to the fact that sometimes the priorities of this Justice Department, or Justice and Public Safety, whatever the name is, we're having trouble because they don't seem to be aligned with what they say. I mean, the Department of Justice itself put out a strategic plan for 2014 to 27, with the first goal being implement initiatives that enhance community safety,
right?
Which this is one. What do? They go and announce a courthouse, again, which is not anywhere to be found in the strategic initiatives. So again, they talk a big game about doing things to enhance their safety of women and children and enhance public safety, for which this court, anybody who's been involved with it, will tell you the value of it. But they're doing one thing, and they're saying one thing, and they're doing another. And that's one of the problems here. We have the Premier saying he sees its value, but at the same time not showing us what he's going to do with it.
Yeah, I'd also like to know a timeline associated with this particular internal review and what comes of it specifically, not that it's protected by any cabinet secrecy or cabinet documents and or any access to information legislation. If this is going to be seriously considered and reviewed and the potential to expand it province-wide, how, why, where, when, and that's going to be an important part of it. And we're happy to keep our eyes on and keep the conversation going.
You just hit the nail on the head. Show us what they have.
Yeah, because why not, right? I mean, it's part of the crime, or part of the justice system. We should all know what's available and the benefits or the pitfalls associated with any decision. Andrew, I always appreciate your time.
Really appreciate your time today, Patty. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.